we covered the Ukraine conflict. There was a lot of great things that you said. And now let's show you guys the opposition. Someone who took everything that we said, just talking about the facts on the ground, right? And then they take that and they call you a Putin puppet just by explaining the facts. Now, we already talked about the Cenk and Bree conversation. And when you listen to the conversation, you explain why, you see why I say there's no left infighting. The difference between RBN and TYT is so wide, you can't say that's infighting. There's no infighting here. These people are capitalists, these people are imperialists, and these people are in no way, shape, or form our allies. These people, their only job is to divide what would be a movement to challenge the establishment power. So when we have a March for Medicare for All, they are there to attack the March for Medicare for All. Yep. We have truth tellers that tell the truth about Ukraine. They're here to repeat, literally verbatim, what you will hear on MSNBC regarding the Grayzone and their coverage of Russiagate. So with that said, I know you guys have been waiting for this. One part that I found very interesting while watching the debate and why I decided to cover it, we didn't get to this part on our live stream yet when we covered the Bree and Cenk debate, is what he said about the Grayzone, because Cenk, being the divider that he is, he's here to put people in camps. If you're against the establishment, you'll be part of the fake left. We try to put Bree in, and he put the Grayzone there because they're not repeating state narratives. So let's watch the video, and I want to get your reaction to this nonsense. And you can correct.
I haven't seen it before, just for the record.
Oh, this is great. So we can get
my first time seeing it. So you get
right,
it's
so
like
let's check it out. And then we can use this as a time for education, because that's what I like to do with these drama segments. Let's use that as time to educate people on what he is getting so wrong. Because there's a giant segment of what Caleb Maupin called the bread tube that has been hijacked, and they pretty much just repeat state talking points uncritically. Like the Voss Limbaughs, the Cenk Uygurs, it's all he's the same one. He pushing NATO leftism right now. That's not organic, and there's no one that can convince me otherwise. But anyway, let's go to TYT and let's hear what they said. This maybe like 2-3 minutes, and after that we get your reaction to it. This is the debate that Bree destroyed him in.
Some portion of the right, etc. I'm going to take yes for an answer on all those, but there are other issues. There's actually 3 buckets. There's the bucket in the middle where we don't agree. I don't agree with some people saying they're on the left, right? So Ukraine, for example, questioning the amount of funding that's going to Ukraine totally makes sense. I believe Ukraine is in the right, but hey, whenever we ask for anything at home, we never get it. But as soon as defense contractors are going to make money off of it, we're spending billions. And that isn't necessarily even going to Ukraine. So I find that legitimate. But then when you get the gray zones, and I hate saying, oh, the Ukrainians are terrorists for fighting back against the Russians. How dare they kill the Russian soldiers? They literally said it. Jimmy did a video about how the Ukrainian civilians were terrorists for firebombing the tanks that were coming to blow up their house.
Wait, he talked about Jimmy Dore and me at the same time. I don't know what Jimmy said, but
I think I maybe don't watch as much Jimmy Dore as you might, but I do listen to Aaron Mate and Katie Halper's show. I do hear him in that context. I do see clips from Grayzone people and things like that. I had Max Blumenthal on the show, and my understanding is that there are these specific instances in which there's not reporting on the West about various skirmishes, about the presence, even if you think it's too minor to talk about, but the presence of Nazi and right-wing groups in the context
that's
of
what I'm talking about, Brianna. You're validating insane right-wing talking points. So
but wait a minute,
it's a right-wing talking point to be against Nazis.
No, that's a Vladimir Putin talking point as a justification for attacking them.
But for Cenk, I mean, there's a credibility issue here, because if you mischaracterize other people's arguments, I think there's a legitimate reason to have a
credibility issue. I've never seen Grayzone not agree with Vladimir Putin. They are total and utter puppets for him.
Jesus, fuck, you guys. Where do we even start with that? You guys see this meltdown?
Well, it's like
where do you want to start, Max? There's so much to say there.
That was my first time seeing it, and like I feel more disgusted than the reaction video I did to 2 Girls, 1 Cup after watching Cenk sweating and bloviating. I mean, what? Like, don't I deserve better enemies than Chunk Ogre, the washed up MSNBC failure who can barely form a coherent sentence. And if you look at what he's doing, he's avoiding the issues by using the gray zone to appeal to the prejudices of his normie brain dead viewership. And if you're still watching TYT at this point, I just don't. I mean, why not just at least get a higher production value with MSNBC and watch like David Plouffe with a slightly better background than Cenk, like, and you know, Chris Hayes, you know, it's like I prefer like a Rachel Maddow impersonator to like just like one of the most inarticulate, unappealing characters in corporate media. And TYT is corporate media. It's supported by corporations. What he's doing though is he's using the reputation of the gray zone, which has been our reputation has been tarnished and attacked relentlessly by the foreign policy establishment and all of its tentacles in the media. And he's leveling it to avoid having an actual argument about these issues about Ukraine. And he's just like, it's like talking to a really stupid propagandized normie that you just might meet in, you know, I don't know where you would meet them in real life. They're probably like living online, but he's just highly propagandized. He's like, I believe that Ukraine is in the right, but he doesn't say why. And he can't get into any of the substance of the arguments. But in the gray zone, you got the gray zone. I see this all the time with these TYT and Bread2 people. Will just be like, unlike the gray zone types, or that guy Marcus who does this show with Sagar and Jetty. I saw him say,
oh Jesus, you know, fucking Christ. Don't get me started. Go ahead.
He was like, you know, Republican minority.
You see, that's the black voice they get on Breaking Point, is the imperialists.
Well, him, I mean, not to divert from Cenk too much, but him and Sagar seem to have gotten these kind of like special minority fellowships from the Hoover Institute because it serves the interests of white Republicans. So they wanted them in there. And actually I'll go into Marcus in a second, but I'm just saying he was one of those characters who would just invoke the gray zone to take all arguments off the table. And that's the thing. No one ever debates us.
Did. And I know you didn't see the debate, but it's something else. Like people making fun of it all online right now because like Cenk was using Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore, and he was like he was having this internal debate with you guys using Bree as a proxy. She was like, I'm right here. Why you keep talking about Jimmy Dore?
Like the gray zone literally called. He always does. So he says something is literal, but it never happened. He's like, they literally called the Ukrainians terrorists because Jimmy Dore said they firebombed the tank. It's like, wait, so we literally called them something that Jimmy Dore allegedly called them, but Jimmy Dore isn't with the gray zone. And there have been acts of terrorism there, though. That's just indisputable fact. The constant shelling of civilians in Donetsk, deliberate attacks on marketplaces in Donetsk that have been filmed and documented, they don't enter through the like 76 pounds of lard that encases Cenk's golf ball sized brain. So he doesn't know about that. And everything that he echoes is a function of the propaganda, the corporate propaganda that he internalizes. And that's really the role of TYT, is to kind of take Democratic Party and military intelligence propaganda and put it in a language that sounds kind of progressive, and then to occasionally do some, this is a thing I've actually seen, you know, because I've been around Democratic Party circles and like those progressive movement circles which are all billionaire backed. And they have this thing where they attack the Democrats like really harshly, but it's because the Democrats won't go far enough to take on the Republicans. That's their thing. It's not that the Democrats are corrupted by Wall Street in a war state. It's that they're just not anti-Republican enough.
Yeah, and I explain this concept all the time. Like people who like in these same like Cenk Uygur style leftists, I call them TYT leftists, they were so upset with me because I wouldn't vote for Jim Crow Joe in the last election, because they were like, oh, you just kick and complaining because you guys not getting everything that you want. As if my complaint is that the Democrats not fighting hard enough. I love that you put it that way. My complaints with the Democratic Party is what they do to our communities, the crimes they commit. Not that they're not doing enough. I want them to stop putting their boot on the neck of our communities. I want them to stop funding genocides. I want them to stop funding the police more. It's not what they're not doing. It's what they're actually doing. Amy Klobuchar take the second most out of police funding out of anyone in the Senate. And then she failed to prosecute Derek Chauvin, and that leads to his murder. Then Joe Biden invited the George Floyd family to his White House, wrote a bill in his name that funds the police more. The Republicans wish they can get away with that kind of disrespect, right?
Yeah.
So people, they miscategorize why we don't like the imperialist party. But go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I mean, you have like Anna Kasparian's rant against the Democrats. I am never. They always get so worked up. I could never just by myself and a camera get that worked up. You got to be kind of miss like a few cards short of a deck to get that emotional with just you and a camera. But she was like, I will never. And like you could see her bun tightening and like ever vote for the Democrats again until they, but it was because they had not codified Roe, and like that's, you know, it's what Jim Moore had been saying, but she's basically saying that they just aren't taking on the Republicans harshly enough. And then you could see she pulled back like pretty quickly from that line and is back to the line they're always at, which is gatekeeping for the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is actually, it's always sort of played this role that it's currently playing, but it's changed. It doesn't have its New Deal elements anymore. It doesn't even have the classical liberal elements that we saw in the 1980s congressional Democrats, where they actually would take on something like Iran-Contra. Today's Democrats would celebrate Ollie North the way they celebrate Liz Cheney, because they love proxy wars. They love the intelligence community. That's what they call it. They don't call it like, they don't think anything's wrong with the CIA. And as we've seen, they love the FBI because it's going after the bad orange man. You have Charles Booker, who's, you know, marketed himself as a progressive candidate who also defends the interests of Black people who have been historically oppressed in the American South. And he's running in a Southern state, and he's the pro FBI candidate. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, espionage act. I did a story on this weekend. This is a new tweet where he's like attacking Rand Paul, the libertarian from the right. Like, bruh.
Yep. So the Democrats are pushing those lines, and the left, the professional left, including a lot of the socialist organizations, have spent a lot of their energy investing in candidates who are supposed to go into the Democratic Party and change business as usual. And instead, those candidates have been absorbed into the party. We see this happen again and again. That was the role that TYT was actually supposed to play around the 2016 Bernie campaign, which was to shake up the party instead of serve as a gatekeeper. So they have nothing to show for themselves. All their candidates are supporting the FBI. They're supporting the Ukraine proxy war. And then you have this right-wing whack job who comes into Washington from Georgia, this gun-toting right-winger who hates socialism, or so she says she hates socialism, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she says all the stuff that the squad is supposed to be saying about Edward Snowden and Julian Assange being pardoned, about the 40 billion being this gigantic money laundering grift. She is condemning the Azov battalion and did a Twitter thread that was absolutely excellent about the Azov battalion being actually a literal neo-Nazi wing of the Ukrainian National Guard, funded through the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, which has carried out heinous human rights abuses while being celebrated by the Ukrainian diaspora in the streets of New York. It's all true. And it's so left, the identity of the left is in a state of complete crisis right now, as they see that their relationship with the Democratic Party has blown back on them. They don't have anything to show for themselves. And so that intensifies the need for gatekeeping and for attacking those of us who are moving away from that perspective. And you see this gatekeeping not only from Cenk, but you see it within more, what you could consider radical elements of the left. And it all comes back to us. It somehow we threaten them, but just, from my point of view, what I'm trying to do with the Grayzone is I'm not trying necessarily to win power. I'm not trying to start my own party or something. I'm just trying to educate people about what's happening out there through journalism. That's what I've always done. And somehow that's really threatening. And, there just aren't any reporters. There used to be some space within the Democratic Party and within the mainstream press for people with that perspective who are just trying to hold power to account. Instead, you see that space carved out to some extent for someone like Rand Paul in the Republican Party. And you see right-wing media create that space through someone like Tucker Carlson. I'm not saying in any way that I agree with all their positions or that I'm a libertarian or whatever, some immigration hardline. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they are creating some space for dissent within their own media and political superstructure, but there isn't that same space within the kind of mainstream left in the US, anywhere near the Democratic Party. It's not allowed. And increasingly, it's less and less allowed within the left as a whole. So, yeah. What else can you do but call us Putin puppets when you can't argue with the facts that we're presenting and appeal to the prejudice of your Democratic viewers?
And I believe that's by design as well. I want to get your thoughts on this because it's just a theory I've been working on, because I see like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they speak about the issue on Ukraine. I saw them. I remember she was tweeting about how we send all this money to Ukraine, but babies don't have baby formula, right?
Yeah.
And then they proposed a bill to I didn't read the bill, but quote unquote fix the baby formula shortage, and she voted against it. I don't honestly think these people are good faith actors, but I think it's a psyop by the establishment. So you get Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, because they all voted no on the Ukraine package, and they are the bad guys, right? Meanwhile, you have Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Squad, Charles Booker. These people all go in on Ukraine because they are given the perceived image of being the good guys. So they want to trick people. Hey, Bernie Sanders is going for Ukraine aid. Bernie Sanders is calling Putin evil. Bernie Sanders isn't questioning NATO, but Marjorie Taylor Greene is. Do you see what the theory I'm getting at? So they want people like, she's bad.
It's humiliating. It's got to be humiliating to a lot of the leftists who tried to encourage others to come from, to come along within their socialist organizations and support Bernie 2020. It's got to be humiliating to them, but none of them have taken any responsibility for doing that or said Bernie is wrong. And, I'm sorry I did that. We need another political direction in this country to provide people with hope, because what they do, and what happens in left organizations and left groupings when the leadership comes along and says, we need to support this candidate or this initiative. And then it just turns out to be this gigantic, not just a failure, but a complete betrayal, is that the rank and file loses hope and leaves and moves on. And some of them may even go to the right or to something else. And that leadership never takes responsibility for their failures. And the writing was on the wall with Bernie 2020 when he started having people like Matt Duss run his foreign policy, people from the Center for American Progress, the billionaire and corporate funded think tank of Neera Tanden in Washington, D.C. was filling up the top slots in Bernie's campaign. His campaign manager came from Center for American Progress as well, Fez Shakir. And these are Democratic Party professionals who are going to completely suppress Bernie's 2016 message, which was already, kind of not so interesting, but at least it was creating some space to challenge the Clintons' control over the Democratic Party and the Obamas and that whole legacy. Anyway, it's all over now. It's done. I mean, Ukraine really showed that it's completely done. And Bernie Sanders, I mean, watch his foreign policy speeches in 2020. He's setting the stage for supporting this kind of conflict by dividing the world into the autocracies and the democracies and creating this Cold War scenario in his speeches that's playing out right now. It's very insidious what Bernie did. He needs to be held accountable as well. But the most bizarre thing to me is that as soon as Marjorie Taylor Greene says what all of these left branded office holders and politicians, including, a perpetual politician, Nina Turner, who can't seem to get elected to dog catcher, what they are supposed to be saying, but they're not saying, is the reaction from professional left media influencers, which is to attack Marjorie Taylor Greene for saying something that they agree with from the right. You're not supposed to do that. And that's because they're trying to guard the rails of the left and prevent people from losing hope in left leadership when they're doing the opposite. It's an identity crisis across an entire movement that is just spreading nothing but alienation and division within its ranks.
That's exactly what it is. Especially when the establishment see the rise of an anti-war movement, they send Barack Obama to kill it. Then whatever is left over, they send these progressive charlatans to kill whatever is left of that, or at least redirect it to a point where it's useless. Like you've seen everyone bootleg John Fetterman recently.
Oh, yeah.
And John Fetterman literally said when he becomes a senator, he's going to deepen ties with Israel. So he sees what the Biden administration is doing. He's like, let's do more than that. I'm gonna show you this tweet because I don't know if you've seen it. I want to get your reaction. This is John Fetterman. This is when I saw this, I was like, hard no, because I'm already a hard sell on any politician as it is. But when I saw this, I'm like, yep, hard no. He said, tonight we saw how we can be united as a country. Plus, take our commander-in-chief, president of the United States, as he takes on Putin. Because, that's what the left really wants to do, Matt. Our main priority is taking on Putin and supporting the people of Ukraine. We must continue showing the world that we as a country must be completely united, stand with Ukraine in the fight against Putin. This is the left candidate.
Well, it's worse than, that he's the left candidate. Like AOC is sort of a left candidate because the left is this boutique thing that just is a byword or stand-in for virtue among a lot of the professional managerial class, grad student types who comprise what is effectively the U.S. left now. But what Fetterman is doing is more insidious than AOC. AOC is kind of like, this is what I am and you like it. Fetterman is trying to appeal to the material interests of a betrayed Rust Belt working class through his image. He's like another, they just keep throwing these different like boy band type deceivers at you. The technology is really impressive. So he's like this big guy and they're like, all these consultants are telling him, yeah, that sweatshirt is great. We got you a new sweatshirt. It's like how Zelensky has his green t-shirt, but Fetterman has his hoodie. And the longer, I mean, he's like, I bet you it's totally within the realm of possibility that Fetterman will wear that hoodie and his like Carhartt jeans or whatever and his Timberland boots to the World Economic Forum in Davos to give a talk. Like, I wouldn't be surprised.
So if John Fetterman was senator this year, he would have voted for Ukraine aid. Just letting you guys know. Here's the Israel story. John Fetterman says he'll lean in on U.S.-Israel relationship as a senator. And this is the same thing with Nina Turner when she said she didn't support BDS and she said we must support Israel. You have a progressive movement right now that what they said, we want to get meager gains, which they're not getting, FYI. But their philosophy is let's get meager gains for the working class by selling out Palestinians. Let's sell out any colonized movement. That's their strategy. And it's crazy. This is the Charles Booker. This is another one where he can't help. He's running against
John McCain, quoting John McCain. At least put it in your own words. Like we're supposed to just bow down. AOC called it, John McCain, an unparalleled example of human decency. Like there's no questioning of him at all in addition to this McCarthyism. But I mean, Fetterman, you're going to see him saying like, oh, we're bringing the Israeli Elbit Systems Arms Company to Pennsylvania. They're creating jobs for our communities. Like that's the level of support he's going to give the working class. Raytheon are job creators and Lockheed Martin. I mean, so it's just a hollow fraud. Like there's no questioning of any of these psyops within any elements connected to the Democratic Party and increasingly within the sort of organized structural professional left.